you referred to your goals. I just took a quick peek at your Instagram and you've got them nicely outlined in some posts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel inspired just by the ethical nature, I guess, that you're approaching this. I'm having another conversation with a collector who's a Christian, and he and I had a really interesting chat just about obsessing over material possessions and that, maybe going a little bit
Hmm.
against what God and Jesus say in the Bible. I was curious, what are your thoughts just about religion and
Hmm.
collecting? What is up? Welcome back to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike Lakusta, aka the Golf Card Collector. And I'm just gonna say it right out the bat. I know I said there was actual mailbag questions and answers last episode, and by the time the episode got to the end, I did not get to them. So today, I promise they will be there after the interview. And with that, I'll kind of set the stage. Last week, we talked with Matt Galvin about religion and how his Christian faith guides his collecting, and is such an intriguing concept for me as a non-believer. I'm not sure what I would really call myself. A spiritual curious individual. I just found it so intriguing that I had to reach out to another person that I know is a Christian and get his take on this whole topic. And that's what you're going to hear today. That's Jason Joyner in the running for Guest of the Year, because this is the man that opened a golf card shop, golf cards and memorabilia store on his golf course. Very unique individual, very unique situation. If you haven't checked it out, check out his very first episode, opening a card shop on a golf course. What definitely is one of the most popular Fondling Cardboard episodes, and recently, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, did a follow-up with him just to see how the grand opening of the store has gone, and it sounds like he's had an excellent first month of business. With that, I want to, set the stage a little bit more, because I've alluded to it a few times, non-believer, curious, whatever. What does that mean about my story? What does faith really mean to Mike? And I'm going to just share, a handful of spiritual experiences from my life. It'll be very brief. I'm not going to get too into detail in each one, but just you kind of understand where I'm coming from, because these last two guests, Matt and now Jason coming up, are firm believers in Christ. They are followers. They are church members. And it might seem, out of the ordinary for someone like myself who doesn't identify as a Christian to be so intrigued in these conversations. And so hopefully once I kind of lay this out, you understand why I'm even having these conversations, and why you, as someone who might be Christian or might not, or might be completely atheist or agnostic or whatever, I don't even know what some of these words mean, but you get the picture. Anyway, so I'm going to rewind all the way back to when I was in high school. Now, an aunt of mine that I'm very close with lived in a small town called Lanceville on Vancouver Island up here in Canada. And Lanceville's a small town, and of course, like every rural small town, has a church. And I remember asking my aunt about Christianity, and she didn't really have any answers for me, but she got into yoga and kind of was spiritually curious herself. And so she said, rather than trying to get you to read a book or trying to explain something that I don't understand, why don't I take you to church and we'll just see what it's all about together? Which, by the way, now as an adult, I applaud my aunt for doing that, because that's a very, out of her comfort zone thing to do, to go into a building with religious people that neither of us truly had, understood or had much connection to. So we walk into this tiny little picturesque church. And I think this is the kind of church that Anne in Green Gables would have gone to. Like, all of the older people were dressed up in their old-timey, frilly-sleeved blouses, just the most traditional kind of looking people you could imagine. And my aunt and I tried to dress well, but we definitely felt a little bit out of place. And as the pastor looks out to this relatively small congregation, probably 30 people, basically packed, like it was not a big building. And he kicks off the service by saying, I noticed that there's some new faces in the congregation today, and I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And he sort of gestures broadly towards the group, and my aunt and I just look at each other and we're like, there must be someone else that's new here, really? And we look around and everyone is looking at us. And we both just turned beet red, and after about 4 or 5 long seconds of silence, I think he recognized that we felt uncomfortable, and he says, that's okay, and moved on. I wish I could say that from that service I discovered something interesting about Christianity or about myself, but honestly, I don't remember anything about it, and I remember being vaguely intrigued, but it wasn't about any concepts. It was more of a feeling that this group of people supported each other clearly, and that there was some kind of strong ethical bonding that brought these people together, not physically or emotionally, but just on a level of like how they lived their lives. And that's what I almost felt drawn to, was coming from a lot of ugliness, let's say, in my childhood and from situations I had faced. I was just looking for something good, some moral and ethical guidelines and boundaries that I could contain myself into and find some kind of safety in this life. It wasn't until an ugly high school breakup that I actually opened the Bible and started searching within Christianity for some specific guidelines on how to help me get through a situation and what I should be doing to dig myself out of a hole and what are my next steps. And I was reading a King James version, which is like hear ye style of language, and I honestly don't even know if I got much out of it, but just the practice of opening it up and reading it helped me get through that phase, obviously, and felt meditative in a time of chaos. And fast forward into university, a friend of mine was a Christian and invited me along to a church service. And so I tagged along with him and his family and friends. And I enjoyed those services. It was actually my first experience socializing and having friends and having conversations afterwards. That was a whole new experience for me. And at the time, I still totally wrestled with those quirky miracles that a believer has to accept in order to be a Christian, and wrestling that with my logical brain as an engineer and somebody that just believes in science and the scientific process. But what I was getting out of that experience wasn't logical or rational. In fact, when I talked with Matt Galvin offline, just exchanging messages, I put it this way, which I'm getting a bit vulnerable here, but hey, we only live once. So I said to him, I experienced a lot of loneliness and shallowness in my childhood, and I was always searching for something bigger. And in university, I would go to a couple times a month to church with my friends because with my wild lifestyle of partying and debauchery, I think I needed something to tell me to feel like a better person. As I've entered adulthood, I've continued wrestling with those illogical and irrational aspects of Christianity and religion and spirituality. But for some reason, when I pictured my life and my wife before I met her and what I wanted, I had this white picket fence Christian lifestyle in my mind. And that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to strive for. And I remember being on this road trip. I have a trailer and I borrowed my grandfather's truck and I drove up to the Yukon, which is about as remote as you can get in the world. And, spending days at a time alone, a lot of time to think to myself. And the woman that I imagined, that I visualized, turns out to be exactly who I married. This wonderful, truthful, beautiful Christian woman. And as I started dating her, I attended an Alpha course. For those of you who aren't familiar, Alpha is like an introductory program for people who are new to Christianity. Usually it's like an evening thing for adults, and they would basically have activities, small table conversations, and just give everybody a chance to kind of hash everything out with, different conversation starters every week. And there would be alpha group leaders designated to kind of guide those experiences. And I came out of the alpha course just feeling even more lost, honestly, because I was feeling more deeply rooted in my logical brain. And to this day, it's something I haven't been able to get past. But my appreciation for Christianity and all of the wisdom and lessons you can learn from it has continued to grow. And my curiosity is still there. I don't know what it would take for me to go from a purely logical thinker to a believer, but I'm trying not to close the door, and it's conversations with people like Matt and Jason and hopefully others in the future that will hopefully continue me along this spiritual journey as I try to understand how lessons from Christianity and other faiths can guide not only my collecting, but hopefully my life as well. I realize that was a pretty big preamble, and hopefully some of you are still listening. I'm just going to throw it right into the conversation. By the way, Jason talks a lot more about stewardship and what that means for him in his life and his hobby. And so as you listen to Jason talk about this, what I encourage you to think about is whether you're a Christian or not, how can the concept of stewardship influence the way that you collect and the way that you allow collecting to influence you, your values, your self-worth, and your life? What are your thoughts just about religion and collecting?
Yeah. So three of my favorite topics are Jesus, card collecting, and stewardship. If you literally said list out your five favorite things to talk about, it would probably be those three, and then my wife and my kids would be four and five. So I absolutely 100%. I mean, for me, and I know we can all have different views, and you and I haven't had a conversation about Jesus or faith or anything along those lines. But I love talking about Jesus. If I'm allowed to say it, and I hope I am, since you brought it up, I wouldn't be who I am and where I am without him. And I do not feel like life has purpose apart from Jesus. There's many phenomenal people in this world that don't believe the same thing I do, that do awesome, great things for this world and in this world. And so I'm no greater than they are. I'm no better than they are. I just believe I'm saved by the grace of Jesus, and he changed my life. And so not only is that part of who I am, I want to serve him, and by doing that, serve others. And one of the ways I can do that is by loving them, having conversations with them, loving them despite what they believe or don't believe in regards to me. And but I absolutely think as believers there is a place to have a conversation about hobbies that can be consuming, or can become obsessions, and in regards to stewardship. If you kind of paint it with a broad umbrella, the most commonly talked about topic in the Bible is, of course, Jesus and salvation. You may or may not know this or have ever heard this before, but the second most discussed topic in the Bible is money and stewardship. And so God is very interested in those topics, else his word wouldn't have so many things about it. So I believe that God is the owner of all things. Everything I have is his. He gives me the breath in my lungs. He gives me the health that I have. He's blessed. Every good thing I have comes from him. And I believe that everything he's given me, all the abilities he's given me, the talents he's given me, are to bring him glory. and in so doing, you know, help others and lead people hopefully to Jesus. My pastor one time used to say, help people find and follow Jesus. And there's two elements to that. And so if the way I conduct my business, the way I conduct my life, they may not know it, but hopefully people see that. And even if they don't see it, even if it's not an opportunity for me to articulate it with them vocally, it's hopefully pointing them to Jesus or pointing them to somebody that has integrity like they've never seen before. And so that's
Mm.
why integrity had to be one of my goals, because it's part of who I am. If I can't do what I'm doing with integrity, then I don't believe it's honoring the Lord at all. And your question about collecting and stewardship, I think there's a place. I think there's a place for trying to think how to word this in a simple way. If there's many parables in the Bible about, you know, the parable of the talents and other parables about, you know, where Jesus says there was a farmer and they did this and then and God honored this blessing. And so you can take time to, I don't have time to preach on it in our few minutes here, but there's plenty of examples where we can see where God gives somebody something in the parables, and the command is to go now do something with it. But at the same time, it's still with a recognition that it's his. And so all the money I have in my bank account, it's not mine. I have to view that as the Lord's if I'm going to be a good steward of it. A steward is not an owner. A steward is a manager of something. And so when I tithe, when I give back, I'm not giving back to the Lord something that's mine. I'm just giving back to him what I believe is already his in the first place. And so if I'm taking what he's given me and what he's blessed me with and expects me to steward, and if I'm doing it in a responsible way that helps to grow that, that helps to, you know, money's earning money, but then at the same time, I'm always open to giving. And I'm always like, I'm going to sell some of my Ricky Henderson collection. I think I mentioned the first episode that Ricky Henderson's my favorite athlete ever, and I have a huge Ricky Henderson collection. I've got a lot of duplicates. I'm going to sell. I decided actually last week, and I'm going to sell some of that, and I'm going to give it to some missionaries. Haven't identified who yet. Give it to some nonprofit missionary outlets here in the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area, as well as to my church. I think that's a God honoring. I'm going to be making money on that. I spent money on it, but I paid less than what all those cards are worth. So as I sell them, I'm going to, I'm going to be giving that money back to help further the Lord's kingdom here on earth. And so, so that's the quickest way I know to answer that question in a quick way without a 20 to 30 minute full thought out message. But it's kind of like, I've been blessed with a lot. I know that. I know there's people that are not as fortunate as me. Everything I have is the Lord's anyway. And so everything I have to hold with an open hand, because if the Holy Spirit's leading me to give it, I need to give it because it's his anyway, not mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. You brought up some interesting points like selling your cards and offering that to the church community. That's a very honorable thing to do, and an obvious way of how you can use cards to further your Christianity. Obviously, talking about your faith on a
Mm-hmm.
platform like mine is spreading the word. So that's a way that you can be a steward in the hobby by spreading the word. Um, but I also wanted to wrestle a little bit with just the nature of collecting, because
Mm-hmm.
I I don't have a strong religious background. It's something I've always been drawn to, but I've never fully
Mm-hmm.
allowed myself to open up to it. So I'm gonna share a quote here, and let me know if I'm way off in how I
Okay.
interpret this. But
Sure.
it's do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy
Mm-hmm.
and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. And that's
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 6:19 to 21. And when I think of that quote as a I'm gonna call myself a non-Christian, as somebody who
Okay.
doesn't know Christianity as well as I'm sure you do. If I were to try and interpret that, I would think that God is saying, don't put yourself into your hobby. Don't let that become your
Mhm.
identity. Don't let that take up
Right.
all your time. So how do you wrestle with that topic, that issue?
Sure. Well, I think the last part of that, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. To me, that's the most important part of those verses. And by the way, I appreciate you bringing this up. I mean, I love this conversation. So thank you for being vulnerable and asking that question, and thank you for allowing me the privilege to answer these questions. I hope this is just the beginning of many conversations that any of us can have. But again, I told you I felt led last week to sell some of my duplicate Ricky Henderson cards to give money to some initiatives and things we're doing at church. Our family, we do foster care as well, and so there's some foster care initiatives that I want to give to as well. Um, if I felt the Holy Spirit leading me to do that, and I was disobedient, then I'm demonstrating that my heart is in my Ricky Henderson collection, not what the Holy Spirit is leading me to do.
Hmm.
Um, so God's God. He can do whatever he wants. He doesn't need me. He doesn't need us. He just invites us to be a part of what he's doing in people's lives. And so if I'm disobedient there, then I'm demonstrating that my heart's in that collection more than it is, and that's becoming an idol in my life, if that's the case. And I think collecting is something that can become an idol, quite frankly, very, very easily. How many people do we know of that maybe don't pay their bills because they spent too much money on cards? Okay, that's an issue. You
Hmm.
know, if you're a dad or a husband out there, and your spouse and kids are going without things this month that they need because you're the sole provider and you spent too much money on cards, that's a problem. You know,
Hmm.
apart from Jesus, that's a problem. That's a problem. You've got a spouse and you've got kids that are dependent on you. Go take care of them. Um, but um, but if we follow a very strict, and there was, without going into church history, there was a group of monks many thousands of years ago that took that verse, and don't ask me to tell you which monk sect it was, because I couldn't tell you. But they literally, and this is a G-rated podcasts, but they literally sold all their possessions, including their clothes. And so they were known for, around their monastery, walking around with no clothes
Naked.
on,
Wow.
because they viewed clothes as a possession. Well, I mean, I think that's an error in taking
Hmm.
that a little too far. Um, but so I think but their heart was in the right place, probably.
Hmm.
But I don't think God wants us to walk around naked and homeless. But that verse might stir up, hey, do I need $100,000 car, or would I be okay with a $30,000 car?
I
Like, my
see.
wife and I are doing quite well, and we're actually doing this podcast from my car, because, as I told you, the only place I could get where I could be quiet while I was working today. That's not worth very much. It's got a lot of scratches on it. It's got 100,000 miles. I could afford a much nicer vehicle, but why? It gets me where I need to go. It's reliable. My heart's not in my car, you know.
Hmm.
And that's not to say that nice things are bad. I'm not saying that at all. We live in a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and at age 47, I was able to retire from a sales job to go work at my golf course. We're far blessed beyond what I deserve. But in so doing that, we also try to bless others and do everything we can to bless others. The Bible is very clear that all the blessings we have, they come from the Lord, and He gives them to us so that we can be a blessing to others. But that doesn't mean we have to walk around, with no possessions and not do anything, and or not have anything. Which is why I think that last part of that where your treasure is, there your heart is also. It's really just kind of for every individual hearing this, like, where is my heart? Where are the idols in my life? If you're really open to following Jesus, or if somebody hearing this is a believer and is trying to follow Jesus, like I am, to the best of my ability, and I fall short most days, most weeks, you will find me falling short, which is why I need the grace of Jesus and those around me every day. But if I'm really in a posture of trying to follow Jesus, then I have to, in the collecting world, I have to kind of check, do I really need that Scotty Scheffler signed Sports Illustrated rookie card? Gosh, that would look so nice in my cabinet. Oh man, I would love to look at that every day. Or, Lord, is there a better use for this money? Is there something you want me to do with this money? Or from a business standpoint, I might spend $400 for something that I plan to resell for $500. And then it's okay, what do you want me to do? Lord, it's yours anyway. If I just took $400 you gave me to steward and put it on this card, Lord, you're now the owner of that card. That's the posture of my heart. So therefore, when I sell this card for $500, hey, Lord, this is your $500. It's not mine. What do you want me to do with that? Is the mom there's currently a child at my house today with my wife and my daughter that we're doing 2-day-a-week foster care for. The single mom of this child is struggling to make ends meet. So if I sell a card today for $500 that I put $400 on, do you think that mom could use that $100? Maybe I could buy her some groceries or something. So anyway, it's a matter of the posture of the heart, and just checking that with the Spirit on what the Lord wants for, if we believe it's His anyway, what does He want us to do with it? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. If I were to put a button on it, I really, it reminds us that cards can be a source of joy, nostalgia, community, but they shouldn't become that idol that consume our hearts. And collectors should reflect on what their motivations are. Tips, I guess, kind of reflecting on that particular passage would be avoid obsession. It's easier to fall in the trap of just chasing those grails and obsessing over the value of cards. But that can drain, not only your joy in the hobby, but also your fulfillment and your religion. And then secondly, focus on relationships. So I really enjoy chatting with you and others.
Thank you, Mike.
In our community. And that's, the real treasure could be friendships, stories, memories, those kind of things that allow us to feel connected to the act of collecting and those and not just the cards themselves. Even though we talk a lot about the cards, the treasure is really the connection that we're making. And then lastly, balancing priorities. So it can become, the hobby can be fulfilling, but faith, family, personal well-being, those should be the core of our focus.
Everything in life ultimately will let us down other than the Lord. I love my wife, but ask her, I let her down.
Absolutely.
And so everything fades away except the Lord.
John Morton, for instance, I love the way he talks about being a curator of cards, because he isn't investing himself fully into the card itself, but he considers himself almost like a steward to take care of that card and then pass it on to the next person. And if he has fulfillment and value in that, it could just be in the fulfillment he gets out of the process. For everybody listening, I encourage you to reflect on your hobby behavior, avoid some of those pitfalls, and happy collecting.
Thanks so much, Mike. Good to see you again, and always enjoy our chats together.
Now let's circle back to the question I asked you to think about during that conversation. How can the concept of stewardship influence the way that you collect and the way that you allow collecting to influence your life? Well, at the end of the conversation there, I tried to draw a parallel between what John Morton described as curating the history of a card versus the way that Jason describes stewardship in the way he collects. And when I look at the definition of stewardship, which is referring to the responsible management and care of something, often a way that preserves or enhances it for the future. And on first glance, it seems like I hit the nail on the head. But I want to make a big distinction here between curation and stewardship, because in the way that Jason describes stewardship in collecting, the cards are not the focal point. The focal point is really the experience and the value you can contribute to the world and your community around you through the vessel of cards. Whereas the way I've looked at this before is stewardship of cards is just taking care of them and making sure they're safe and making sure they end up in a good home when it's no longer your turn to own them. So as you continue your collecting journey, try to remind yourself, how will I get fulfillment out of this experience that adds value to me, my community, those around me, more than just preserving the cardboard itself? I know the show is called Fondling Cardboard, but let's call it today, and today only, fondling the community, fondling care and compassion and love through cardboard. Oh, this is getting a bit weird with some of the things I think of. Mailbag. All right, first up we got RJ Spallone, who said, who is the top true rookie prospect signed to Upper Deck? Not guys like Hovland and Morikawa that have rookie cards since 2021. And I answered you, RJ, already on the thread. This was in the Golf Cards and Memorabilia Facebook group. Victor Hovland did not have any cards in 2021. So Victor Hovland was, his rookie cards are in 2024. So he's probably the main chase guy. Some might say Max Homa. For me, it's Corey Connors. Maybe the British guys out there want to chase Matt Fitzpatrick. You know, there's some chase golfers, but at the end of the day, I think it should come down to who you want to personally collect. I don't expect everybody to be enthralled with the Canadian PGA players, but that's why I say to each their own. Oh, and actually, Mark Miller chimed in and said Gordon Sargent, Rose Zhang are a few that come to mind. And that's true. Rose Zhang actually had a lot of hype. So there you go. Some LPGA love. All right, moving on to Vincent Meyer. What is the value cycle on, let's say, the same player on a 40 to 50 years career journey versus card collecting? What are the variables that affect card value, popularity, and when are people attracted? Specific period. Example, is a rookie card more attractive after a player passes away? Key milestones, rookie player, peak of career, lots of wins, retirement, death. All right, Vincent. I don't know exactly how you were hoping I might break this down, so I'll just share some thoughts off the cuff. Like, it seems like you're asking a few questions. So for one, you're trying to kind of describe the value cycle of a player's market, meaning what are some key milestones of when that player's cards are supposed to spike up in value. Now, this is really a collector-focused show, so head over to the my buddy Paul at nooffseason.com and the Sports Card Strategy Show. He talks about this kind of stuff all the time. But out of the key milestones that you mentioned, maybe I'd get more granular on that peak of career. So in golf, for instance, if a player wins a major, well, then you can imagine they should spike. If they go on a hot streak, like Tony Finau comes to mind when he went on that. He won like 4 or 5 events in a short succession, something like that, on-field performance. And similarly to baseball, basketball, football, other card collecting, if a player's performing well, their cards should react. Their card prices should react. Now, another key milestone is Hall of Fame. Excuse me. If a player is going to make it into the Hall of Fame, you would anticipate that their card prices would go up, but it's not when they're inducted. The price increase would happen when it's announced. And that brings me to my last point, which is, at the end of the day, it's all about when people are talking about that player. It's all about hype. And when somebody gets announced that they're going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame, that's when people are excited about them. And that's when the prices you would expect to react. On the actual big day, when they have the ceremony and you see the interviews and maybe you can watch it on TV and you finally see their name listed on the Hall of Fame website or Wikipedia page or wherever it is that you look that stuff up, by then the spikes would have already happened. And then to address one more comment you mentioned, is a rookie card more attractive after a player passes away? I think that's totally up to personal preference and personal collector's taste. Maybe taste is a distasteful word to use in the context of a person dying, but But at the end of the day, I would say the thing that goes up in value or becomes more attractive after a player passes away is autographs, because there can't be any more of that autograph. Kobe Bryant comes to mind. When he passed away, even though he did a fair amount of signing, his autographs are worth a good price because there aren't any more coming around. All right, next up is Brian Connor, who asks, set from the 1990s, I just received from the UK. Not valuable, but it's wrapped in a thin tissue paper with a proof sticker. Was going to put it in my newer set album, but should I keep it wrapped and purchase another set? I'm just taking a quick look at the picture. I don't know this set from the 90s. I mean, it depends on the price. Like, if it's a few dollars, then sure, buy another one and then keep this one wrapped. Who knows? Maybe it's rare that it's wrapped in this tissue paper. I don't know what that tissue paper is. Is it the original tissue paper that the cards were distributed in? Or is it a repacker? Or is this a shipping method? I think I'm missing some information to really help you out here. But yeah, it just depends on what your personal goals are. If you want to show the cards off, tear apart that proof sticker and put them in your album. If it's not no trouble to get another set, then yeah, get another set. All right, last question is by Brian Tivik. Sorry, Brian, I probably pronounced your last name terribly. Talk about the different colors of Tiger Tour threads and print run of each, if possible, based on research. Now, when you say tour threads, I think you're referring to a patch insert set from, what was it, 2001 Upper Deck or 2002 Upper Deck Golf? Yeah, it must be 2001. I mean, so talk about the colors. Well, red is obviously going to be the most desirable because it's Tiger. Sounds like there's a handful of different colors. I'm sorry, Brian, I don't have a lot of information, but another Brian Paul, chimed in, and thank you, Mr. Paul, for answering this. He says, I'm a Tour Threads set collector, and I have looked for print run numbers for a long time. Hopefully someone out there has that info. With that said, the white Tiger, which is listed as short print, has 202 PSA and 198 BGS. So that's referring to the number of cards graded on their pop report. While the red Tiger has 60 with PSA and 57 with BGS, and 16 white and 7 red at SGC. I'm sure some people have crossed over, so the grade counts wouldn't be 100%. Brian, just thank you for mentioning that because that's true. But there's also cards out there that are ungraded. If approximately 400 white and 120 red are graded, then maybe 500 or 600 white exist and maybe 200, 300 red exist. He says, I always wondered how many swatches they could get out of one shirt. There's two types of red shirt cards, puffy and regular. Maybe, I don't know, what do we think, people? 100, 150 patches per shirt? That's what Brian thinks. I'm totally happy leaving Brian Paul's answer to Brian Tivik's question. I'll just add that these Tour Thread cards are interesting because they're essentially a rookie patch card for Tiger Woods. And I honestly did not like the look of them when I first saw it. I thought they were pretty lame. It's a very simple design. But the more that I've gotten into golf collecting and the hobby, the more I like it. It's green. It's got kind of a picture of Tiger Woods' face behind him taking a swing. Very simplistic. And if you had a set of these, I could imagine them looking very nice, piled up, in a collage. So yeah, go check out that. And the other thing is, if you could get Tiger Woods to autograph one of these, holy smokes. Talk about a card that would multiply in value with a Tiger Woods autograph. Now, I know that would be next to impossible, but just that simple fact goes to show that it is an important card in the hobby. All right, y'all, that's enough for tonight. I am Mike Lakusta, the Golf Card Collector. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.
Ridiculous. meticulous golf card collector